To relax is to step into the only state where manifestation becomes effortless. When Neville Goddard taught, "Be still and know that you are," he was pointing to the secret that most overlook. The moment you release struggle, resistance, and anxious effort, you allow your desire to flow into form. Manifestation is not an act of force but an act of acceptance. It is the quiet inner knowing that what you desire is already yours, already accomplished, already complete in the unseen. Relaxation is not laziness. It is alignment. It is the surrender of doubt, fear, and the belief that something outside of you must change before you can feel fulfilled. When you relax, you return to your true creative power, imagination. And when imagination is allowed to operate without conflict, even what the world calls impossible reveals itself as fully natural, fully achievable, fully within reach. Neville reminded us that all creation is finished. Your desire is not something to chase, it is something to accept. When you relax into the state of the wish fulfilled, you open the door for the impossible to reorganize itself into the possible. Your inner stillness becomes the womb of miracles. Your calm assumption becomes the law that shapes reality. To relax is to trust. To trust is to allow. And when you allow, the impossible has no choice but to manifest. To relax is to return to yourself. It is to come home to the eternal creative power that has always been operating within you, waiting for your permission to move freely. Neville Goddard taught that imagination is the only creative force in this world, yet most people never access its full potential because their minds are tangled in tension, fear, and the exhausting effort to control circumstances. Relaxation is not merely a physical act, it is a spiritual opening, a doorway into the deeper layers of consciousness where manifestation becomes natural, effortless, and immediate. When you release the tightness in the mind, you release resistance in consciousness. And resistance is the only barrier between you and your desire. Neville always emphasized that your inner state determines your outer world. But how can the inner world reflect peace, fulfillment, and answered prayers when the mind is restless, anxious, or fighting for an outcome? You cannot be both tense and receptive. You cannot be both fearful and creative. You cannot be both doubting and manifesting. To relax is to shift from the outer, reactive mind into the inner, creative realm. Relaxation is the posture of knowing. It is the quiet confidence that creation is already finished, that every possibility exists now, and that by choosing a state through imagination, you are not hoping for a future event, you are entering a present reality. When Neville said, "Be still and know that you are God," he was pointing to this power. Only in stillness can you feel your true identity. Only in inner silence can you commune with the deeper self that creates all things. Most people imagine under stress, hoping to change what they fear will happen. But imagination under fear is just more fear. The subconscious mind accepts what you feel most consistently, not what you temporarily wish. If you attempt to force an outcome while feeling desperate, the subconscious hears only the feeling, not the words. This is why Neville insisted that feeling is the secret, and feeling cannot be mastered until the mind is relaxed. True relaxation is a surrender into trust. It is the acceptance that you do not need to figure out how your desire will come. You do not need to force action. You do not need to chase signs or monitor progress. You simply rest in the inner conviction that it is done. The moment you relax, the moment you drop effort, you allow the creative power within to flow without obstruction. Think of a river. When the water moves freely, it is clear, effortless, and powerful. But if you throw rocks into the river, fear, doubt, overthinking, impatience, the flow becomes disturbed. The river does not stop being powerful, it is simply blocked. Remove the rocks, and the river resumes its natural movement. Relaxation removes the rocks in consciousness. It dissolves mental clutter. It clears the channel through which your desire flows into form. Neville often spoke of entering the state akin to sleep, the drowsy, relaxed, drifting state where the mind is calm and suggestible. Why? Because in that state, the conscious mind is no longer the guard at the door. The subconscious, the true creative power, becomes open, receptive, ready to receive the imaginal act. This is why people manifest effortlessly in dreams but struggle in waking life. In dreams, there is no resistance, no fear, no limitation. Everything is possible because the mind is at rest. When you learn to bring that same relaxed, surrendered awareness into your waking imagination, you begin to create consciously with the same ease. Relaxation is also a declaration of faith. When you truly believe something is yours, you stop worrying about it. You stop searching for proof in the outer world. You stop checking your phone, monitoring timelines, or questioning whether it's working. A relaxed mind is a mind that knows the outcome is inevitable. It no longer clings, it no longer grasps at the desire. Instead, it embraces the desire as a present reality. This is the secret of effortless manifestation. When the mind is relaxed, imagination becomes vivid. Scenes unfold naturally. Sensations deepen. The feeling of the wish fulfilled becomes easier to inhabit. You move from thinking about your desire to being the one who already has it. Relaxation is the bridge between thought and embodiment. And embodiment is the key to creation. Consider the way you breathe when you know you're safe. Consider the softness in your body when you trust someone completely. Consider the way you settle into your bed when you know tomorrow will take care of itself. That feeling, ease, warmth, surrender, is the same energy that allows manifestation to take root. You are signaling to your subconscious that all is well, that the desire is already accomplished, that there is nothing more to do except receive. Neville said, "Creation is finished." If this is true, and it is, then relaxation is simply the recognition that you are aligning yourself with the version of reality where your desire already exists. You don't manifest by force. You manifest by choosing the state in which your desire is already a fact. And once you choose it, you rest in it. Relaxation becomes your evidence of belief. The world will try to teach you that effort is noble, that hard work guarantees success, that striving is the path to achievement. But spiritual creation does not operate on those rules. Inner work is not about struggle, it is about alignment. You do not bend reality through exertion, you allow it through surrender. The moment you relax, you step out of the battle and into the knowing. You stop trying to make things happen and begin allowing things to unfold. To relax is to say, "I trust the power within me more than I trust appearances." To relax is to say, "What I desire is already mine." To relax is to say, "I no longer need to fight my own mind." Relaxation is the ultimate demonstration of faith. It is the inner ease that proves you have accepted the end as accomplished. And in that acceptance, the creative power moves without resistance. When you relax, you reconnect with the part of you that has never doubted, never feared, never lacked. The deeper you relax, the more clearly you feel your true nature, not as a limited human, but as the operant power. And from this state, manifestation becomes not only possible, but inevitable. Effort is the language of fear. Allowing is the language of faith. Whenever you find yourself pushing, forcing, or straining for an outcome, you are revealing that you believe the power exists outside of you, that something out there must be persuaded or rearranged before your desire can appear. But Neville Goddard taught that nothing outside of you has the authority to grant or deny your wish. The outer world is only the echo, the shadow, the reflection of an inner assumption. To take action born of fear is to work at the level of shadows, hoping to change the movie by touching the screen. True change occurs only when you relax, enter the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and allow the unseen power to operate through you. Allowing is not passive, nor is it laziness. It is the highest expression of your creative authority. When you allow, you recognize that creation is finished, and that every outcome already exists in the eternal imagination. You are not trying to create something new, you are selecting from what already is. The moment you choose your desired state, it begins to surround you, influence you, impress itself upon you, and ultimately express itself through your experience. But it can only do this when you stop interfering with it through doubt, worry, or forced effort. Neville often said, "You do not command things to appear. You command yourself to feel the reality of the state desired." Allowing means permitting yourself to dwell in that state without questioning it, without doubting it, without comparing it to the present circumstances. It is letting the imaginal act sit within you undisturbed, like a seed in fertile soil. A seed does not grow faster because you stare at the ground. It does not sprout because you dig it up every day to check its progress. It grows because you leave it alone and trust the process. Allowing is exactly this, trust in the unseen. When you force something, you collapse into the belief that you are separate from your desire. When you allow something, you accept that you are one with it. Forcing comes from the ego, which sees life as a series of battles. Allowing comes from the deeper self, the I am, which understands that everything unfolds according to the state you occupy. You don't need to fight for what is already yours. You only need to claim it internally and allow the outer world to rearrange itself. To allow is to rest in imagination, knowing it is the only reality. It means holding the feeling of the wish fulfilled as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Neville described the feeling as naturalness, the sensation that your desire is already true, already normal, already part of who you are. When you achieve this naturalness, things begin to happen effortlessly. People show up, events align, opportunities emerge, circumstances shift. What you once thought of as miraculous become ordinary because they flow from your assumed state. But this flow cannot occur if you are constantly interrupting it with fear, comparison, or impatience. Impatience kills more dreams than failure ever could. Impatience comes from believing that something is missing, that the desire is far away, that time is an obstacle. But in imagination there is no time. Everything exists now. Allowing means living from the end, not towards it. It means returning again and again to the inner reality until it becomes your dwelling place. When the inner world becomes stable, the outer world cannot help but reflect it. The outer must match the inner. It has no choice. To allow is also to release the how and when. These two questions are the traps that bind most people. They try to imagine their desires, but immediately sabotage the process by wondering how it will happen, how long it will take, who will make it possible, or whether they are doing it right. But the conscious mind is not responsible for the mechanics of manifestation. Its only job is selection. Once you select the state, the subconscious handles the details. Neville compared the subconscious to a womb. It receives, nurtures, and produces without conscious effort. Imagine someone planting a seed and then standing over it every day shouting, "Grow! Why aren't you growing? What if it doesn't work? What if I planted it wrong?" Such a person would be seen as irrational. Yet this is exactly what many people do with their desires. Allowing means stepping back and letting the seed grow in its own perfect way, at its own perfect pace. It means understanding that everything required for the manifestation is already set in motion the moment you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Allowing also requires a quiet mind. Neville often spoke of the importance of inner stillness. When your attention is divided, part of you believing, part of you doubting, the creative power is scattered. But when you quiet the inner chatter, you become a vessel for the deeper reality to express itself. Stillness is not the absence of thought, it is the absence of resistance. It is the inner silence that comes from trusting in the unseen. In this silence, imagination rises naturally, effortlessly, and with great clarity. To allow is to become inwardly receptive. It is to let your desire come to you, not chase after it. It is to recognize that your desire wants you just as much as you want it. It is not running from you, it is waiting for your acceptance. The moment you allow yourself to feel worthy of the desire, the moment you embrace it inwardly, the moment you stop doubting your own imagination, that is the moment the outer world begins to shift. People often confuse allowing with doing nothing. But allowing is not inactivity, it is inner activity, the most powerful kind. When you allow, you hold the desire in consciousness with a calm certainty. You move through the world as though it were already yours. You respond to life from the state of the fulfilled desire. This is what Neville meant by walking in the feeling. Your actions may change, but they are guided effortlessly, without strain. You are no longer forcing action. You are inspired into action. This is the difference between movement born of fear and movement born of faith. Allowing is a declaration. I am no longer striving for what I want. I am embodying it. I am no longer chasing my desire. I am living from it. I am no longer waiting. I am. When you allow, you become a magnet. The desire is drawn to you by the feeling you maintain. Everything aligns when you stop trying to control and begin trusting the inner power that shapes your world. Allowing is not weakness, it is mastery. It is the understanding that your imagination is God in action, and that God does not need to struggle to create. To allow is to step into your natural creative authority. It is to let the unseen work for you. It is to stop arguing with your desire and begin claiming it as your truth. When you truly allow, manifestation is as effortless as breathing, because it flows from your identity, not your effort. Faith is not a belief you repeat with your lips, nor a sentence you write in a journal. True faith is a state of consciousness, a felt inner conviction that the unseen is more real than the seen. Neville Goddard taught that the senses are the great deceivers, for they show you only the shadow of what has already been impressed upon the mind. To build faith in the invisible is to learn to trust the root instead of the fruit, the cause instead of the effect, the inner image instead of the outer appearance. Faith is the art of seeing what is not yet visible to the world, but fully alive within you. The invisible realm is not imagination in the way most understand it. It is the creative substance of life itself. It is the blueprint of all that will ever manifest. Every event, every relationship, every opportunity, every experience first exists as a state of consciousness long before it appears physically. Neville emphasized that your imaginal acts, those vivid inner scenes you accept as true, carry within them the full power to manifest. They are not fantasies. They are seeds, and seeds do not remain hidden forever. They must produce after their kind. But the outer world often contradicts the inner vision. It may present conditions that appear fixed, immovable, or hopeless. The world of facts might insist that your desire is impossible, irrational, or unrealistic. If you rely on the five senses for truth, you will abandon the unseen the moment the visible challenges it. This is why many people waver. They plant a seed in imagination, and then uproot it by doubting what they do not yet see. They declare something true inwardly, but the moment the senses disagree, they collapse into disbelief. This is not faith, it is hope mingled with fear. Neville taught that faith must be unwavering. It must remain firm even when circumstances appear contrary. It must hold to the end with quiet confidence, knowing that the invisible is shaping itself into form. Faith does not argue with appearances. It does not look for signs. It does not need proof. It is itself the proof. Faith is the evidence of things not seen, the assurance of things hoped for, because the imaginal act is the act of creation. Once the desire has been felt as real, its manifestation is as certain as a seed becoming a tree. To build this kind of faith, one must practice withdrawing attention from the tyranny of the senses. The outer world demands your focus, its noise, its distractions, its apparent permanence. Yet all of it is fluid, mutable, and obedient to the inner state. The moment you understand that the visible world is nothing more than the crystallization of past assumptions, you stop fearing it. You stop worshipping it. You stop letting it dictate what you can and cannot believe. Instead, you return to imagination as the one true source of reality. You dwell in the invisible until it feels as solid, as natural, as undeniable as any physical fact. Neville would say that assumption, when persisted in, hardens into fact. This persistence is faith. It is not forceful, it is not anxious. It is a gentle, continuous claiming of the unseen as already accomplished. It is a refusal to let the senses sway you. This quiet inner persistence is what transforms the invisible into the visible. It is a spiritual law, unbreakable and exact. Whatever you assume to be true and feel to be true must appear in your world. Faith grows through experience. The more you trust the invisible and watch it manifest, the more natural faith becomes. But in the beginning, when the senses are loud and the desire seems distant, you must learn to rest your attention in the unseen. You must teach yourself to feel what you cannot yet touch. You must practice inhabiting the inner world with the same conviction you give to the outer one. This is the training of the imagination, learning to saturate your mind with the end state until it becomes your inner home. Many people think they lack faith, but what they truly lack is discipline of attention. Faith is simply attention anchored in the unseen, instead of drifting with appearances. When you repeatedly return your focus to the fulfilled desire, feeling it, sensing it, accepting it, you strengthen the inner conviction. You are teaching your subconscious that the invisible is the true reality. Once the subconscious accepts this, the outer world must conform, for the subconscious is the womb of creation. It produces whatever is impressed upon it with feeling. Faith also requires emotional alignment. Neville taught that feeling is the secret. You cannot merely think about your desire, you must feel its reality so deeply that it becomes more real than what your senses report. The emotional tone of fulfillment is what imprints the subconscious. Joy, relief, gratitude, love. These are the energies that carry your imaginal acts into manifestation. When you feel the end with sincerity, The subconscious receives the message as a command, not as a wish. At times, the outer world will seem stubborn. It may present delay, confusion, or even the opposite of what you want. But these moments are not signs of failure. They are signs that the old state is dissolving. Just as darkness is thickest before dawn, old conditions often intensify before they dissolve. If you mistake this for defeat, you return to the old state and give it power. But if you hold your faith during these moments, knowing the unseen is working beneath the surface, you remain in the state that must externalize. This is the supreme test of faith, to remain unmoved when the senses scream for your attention. Neville described faith as loyalty to the unseen reality. Loyalty means you do not betray the inner vision when the outer world contradicts it. You do not abandon the desire just because the path is unclear. You do not allow fear to persuade you to accept a lesser outcome. Loyalty is steadfastness. It is choosing again and again to believe the inner world over the outer one. When your loyalty remains with the unseen becomes seen. To cultivate faith, you must apply imagination consistently. Before sleep, enter the state of the wish fulfilled. Feel its truth, live the scene. Allow it to saturate your inner world. During the day, return to the feeling whenever doubt arises. Replace fear with inner assurance. Move as though your desire has already manifested. Behave from the end, not toward it. Your faith becomes the atmosphere in which creation occurs. Faith is not struggle, it is surrender. It is releasing the need to know how or when. It is trusting that your inner act is enough. It is permitting the unseen to work through ways you cannot foresee. When you cultivate this inner trust, the invisible becomes your greatest ally. It begins to shape your world with precision, elegance. Persistence is the quiet force that separates those who speak their desires from those who live them. Neville Goddard taught that once you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you must persist in that assumption, regardless of what the outer world reflects. Persistence is not a desperate clinging or a frantic repetition. It is a calm and steady returning to the inner reality, a refusal to abandon the state you have chosen. It is the understanding that imagination creates reality, and therefore the only thing required of you is to remain faithful to the end you have already accepted as yours. Most people fail not because their desire is too large, but because their persistence is too small. They imagine the outcome once or twice, feel hopeful for a moment, and then immediately look to the world of facts for confirmation. When no immediate change appears, they declare the technique ineffective and return to the old state. Neville explained that this is like planting a seed and digging it up each day to see if it has grown roots. The seed cannot grow under constant disturbance. Likewise, your imaginal act cannot manifest if you continually uproot it with doubts, complaints, or contradictory assumptions. Persistence means holding the inner vision steady even when the outer world contradicts it. In fact, Neville taught that contradiction is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that the old state is losing power. Often, just before the new state emerges, the old conditions attempt to reassert themselves with great force. Many people misinterpret this moment and give up, believing the desire is slipping away. But in truth, this is the crucial moment to persist, to ignore the evidence of the senses, and to remain loyal to the unseen. The old pattern is dissolving, and it is the persistence of your imagination that completes the transition. Persistence is not exhausting. It is not mentally draining. It does not require effort, pressure, or strain. True persistence is easeful because it flows from conviction. It is simply the act of returning to the inner feeling whenever you drift away from it. Neville often said, "You simply move back into the feeling of the wish fulfilled." That movement is persistence. You do not fight negative thoughts, you replace them. You do not argue with circumstances, you disregard them. You do not force yourself to feel something, you gently assume it again and again until it becomes natural. To persist is to choose your inner state repeatedly. States are like rooms in a great mansion. You may wander out of the room of fulfillment occasionally, but persistence is the act of walking back into it. You keep entering that room until it becomes the room you live in, the space from which you view the world. Eventually, you forget that you ever lived anywhere else. When the state becomes your dwelling place, your inner home, the outer world must reflect it, for the outer is only a mirror of the inner. Neville's teachings made it clear that the subconscious responds to repeated impressions. A single imaginal act, if perfectly felt, can manifest instantly. But for most people, the mind wanders, worries rise, old beliefs reappear. Persistence ensures that the subconscious receives a consistent message. You are impressing upon it the same end over and over until it accepts that end as true. Once the subconscious accepts it, the manifestation becomes inevitable. It must externalize what it has internalized. Persistence also builds emotional stability. When you persist in the inner state, you begin to detach from circumstances. You stop reacting to every fluctuation in your outer world. You no longer feel anxious when things don't immediately appear. You develop an inner calm, a steady assurance that what you have claimed in imagination is already yours. This is one of the most powerful effects of persistence. Your emotional world becomes anchored in the unseen reality, and your outer reality gradually reshapes itself to match your inner peace. Many people mistake persistence for obsession. But obsession comes from fear, while persistence comes from knowing. Obsession is frantic, restless, and filled with doubt. Persistence is peaceful, consistent, and rooted in certainty. One is a reaction, the other is a conscious choice. Neville taught that once you feel the end, you live in the atmosphere of that end. You do not think about it obsessively, you rest in it. Persistence, then, is not about constant thinking. It is about remaining in the feeling whenever the mind wanders back to the old state. Persistence also requires discipline of imagination. The mind is naturally active. It jumps from thought to thought, often pulled by habit, memory, or fear. To persist in the wish fulfilled, you must train the mind to return to the inner vision. This discipline is gentle, not forceful. It is like guiding a child back onto the path every time they wander off. You do not punish or criticize the child, you simply guide them again and again. Over time, the child learns the way. Likewise, your mind learns to stay aligned with the new state. The more you return to it, the more natural it becomes, until eventually it becomes automatic. Neville often referred to persistence as remaining faithful to the end. This means that once you have chosen your desire, you do not entertain alternate outcomes. You do not imagine failure. You do not indulge in worry. You do not rehearse unwanted scenarios. You stay loyal to the state of fulfillment. Loyalty is a form of love. Love for the desire, love for the version of yourself who already has it, love for the inner world that creates all things. When your persistence is rooted in this kind of devotion, your manifestation becomes unstoppable. Persistence also dissolves fear. When you repeatedly return to the feeling of fulfillment, fear loses its power. Fear can only thrive when you are uncertain of the outcome. But if you persist in assuming the end, you begin to feel that the manifestation is inevitable. Fear fades because you no longer look to the world for validation. You look within, and within you find the fulfilled desire already alive. Persistence replaces fear with certainty. Finally, persistence aligns you with the law of reversibility. Neville taught that if a certain state produces a certain feeling, then the feeling can produce the state. By persistently generating the inner feeling of the fulfilled desire, you activate its physical expression. The feeling is the cause, the manifestation is the effect. Persistence ensures that the cause remains active long enough for the effect to solidify. The world will bend to meet the imagination of a persistent mind. What was once improbable becomes natural. What once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Persistence is the bridge between the unseen and the seen, the invisible and the visible, the conception and the birth. It is the quiet, steady, unwavering devotion to the truth you have chosen within. And when you persist in the inner state with calm certainty, the outer world must yield. It has no choice but to reflect the reality you have faithfully assumed. Gratitude is not merely a polite response to what has already manifested, it is a magnetic force that draws the unseen into form. In Neville Goddard's teachings, gratitude is the natural emotion that arises when you truly feel the wish fulfilled. It is not something you perform, it is something you embody. You do not force gratitude, you experience it because you have already accepted the invisible as real. Gratitude is the perfume of fulfillment, the fragrance that naturally accompanies the inward realization of your desire. When you dwell in gratitude for what you have not yet seen, you are declaring to the subconscious mind that it already exists in your world. Most people wait for the physical manifestation before feeling grateful. They look to the outer world for a reason to celebrate. But Neville taught that the creative act occurs not after the manifestation but before it. Within imagination, within the inner chamber of consciousness. Gratitude, therefore, must arise before the desire becomes visible. It is an act of faith, a sign of inner knowing. When you give thanks for something that has not yet appeared, you are aligning yourself with the reality where it already exists. You are stepping into the state of the fulfilled desire and claiming it as your own. This is why gratitude is so powerful. It bypasses doubt, it dissolves resistance. It places you in a state where the manifestation is not a distant goal but a present truth. When you feel grateful for the invisible, you no longer question when or how your desire will arrive. You no longer cling desperately to signs or fear that the process is not working. Gratitude calms the mind because it affirms that the creation is finished. It is your way of saying, I already have it. And the subconscious, hearing this inner declaration, begins arranging the outer world to match your claim. Neville explained that emotion is the life of every assumption. Gratitude is one of the highest emotions because it carries the tone of completion. When you feel grateful, you cannot simultaneously feel lack. When you feel grateful, you cannot feel fear. When you feel grateful, you cannot doubt your desire. Gratitude fills the inner space with fulfillment, leaving no room for the old state. In this way, gratitude does not merely accompany manifestation. It accelerates it. Gratitude also aligns you with the nature of the creative power itself. The creative power, which Neville called the God within, operates from abundance, not scarcity. It gives freely, endlessly, continuously. When you enter a state of gratitude, you harmonize with that same abundance. You become receptive to more, not less. You stop worrying about what is missing and start acknowledging the fullness of what is already present in imagination. This shift in consciousness opens the door to manifestations that may have seemed impossible when you were focused on lack. Neville often said that imagination is the only reality. Gratitude is the emotional acceptance of that truth. When you give thanks for something that exists only in imagination, you are treating the imaginal act as the real event. This is exactly what manifestation requires. You cannot hold an imaginal scene lightly, like a daydream you hope might come true. You must honor it as fact. Gratitude helps you do this. It makes the imaginal act feel alive, immediate, and true. It roots the fulfillment deeply in your subconscious so that the outer world must reflect it. Many people misunderstand gratitude and try to use it as a technique rather than a natural result of fulfillment. They repeat phrases like, I am grateful, without feeling anything. They write lists of blessings while still dwelling in fear or doubt. But gratitude without feeling is hollow. Neville emphasized that feeling is the secret. Not words, not affirmations, not rituals, but the inner sensation of truth. Gratitude must be felt in the body, in the heart, in the depths of consciousness. It must rise naturally from the assumption that the desire is already real. When this feeling is genuine, it has tremendous creative power. To cultivate true gratitude, you must practice entering the state of the wish fulfilled. Imagine the moment after your desire has manifested. Feel the relief, the joy, the excitement, the sense of completion. Let your imagination fill with the scene until it feels vivid and alive. Then allow gratitude to emerge naturally. You do not need to force it. It will come on its own because the subconscious already accepts the imaginal act as real. In this state, gratitude feels effortless. It is the most natural response in the world. Gratitude also elevates your entire consciousness. It lifts you out of frustration, impatience, and fear. It brings you into harmony with a larger sense of life. When you feel grateful, you are no longer chasing your desire, you are welcoming it. You are no longer wishing, you are claiming. You are no longer doubting, you are knowing. This shift in attitude changes the way you move through the world. You speak differently. You think differently. You react to circumstances differently. You radiate the energy of someone who already possesses what they once sought. And the world inevitably responds to this new state. When challenges arise, gratitude helps you remain steadfast. Instead of reacting to negative circumstances, you return to the feeling of fulfillment and give thanks for the invisible unfolding. This neutralizes fear and prevents you from reverting to the old state. Gratitude becomes your anchor, your compass, your emotional guide. It reminds you that appearances are temporary and that the unseen is far more powerful than the seen. Neville taught that every desire has its own appointed hour. but persistence and gratitude shorten that hour. They speed the process because they maintain the inner state without interruption. When you combine imagination, persistence, and gratitude, you create a perfect environment for manifestation. Gratitude is the emotional glue that holds the state together. It keeps you aligned with the end even when the senses tempt you to waver. Gratitude is also a spiritual law. Whatever you appreciate appreciates. Whatever you bless blesses you. Whatever you thank grows. Gratitude amplifies the energy of your desire and sends a clear signal to the subconscious. This is my reality. And the subconscious, which creates your world with absolute fidelity, must respond. The true purpose of gratitude is not merely to manifest things, it is to transform you. When you live in gratitude, you become a vessel for abundance, love, and fulfillment. You begin to see life through the lens of possibility rather than limitation. You awaken to the truth that everything you desire already exists within you, waiting for your acceptance. Gratitude is the final seal, the closing act of creation. It confirms that the inner event is complete. And once the inner event is complete, the outer world must obediently align. For imagination creates reality, and gratitude is the song you sing when you already know the victory is yours.